Hello, my name is Maja Korica, and I am the co-author of the paper Better CSR, Return to Neighborliness, which I wrote with my colleague Yoann Bazin. And today I'd like to just talk a little bit about the motivation that we had for this paper and really what the paper in short is trying to do. In the early days of the pandemic, we really felt very intimately this connection to place. All of a sudden, it really became clear that our communities were very much physical spaces in which we could engage with each other in a sort of neighborly way. We would get leaflets through the door offering help, and there was a real sense of neighborliness, of community being reinvigorated. And this was matched by other apps that were emerging at the time, but also kind of really interesting stories in the business media of corporations and businesses really retooling and rehashing their corporate social responsibility activities and dedicating a part of that effort toward really immediate response, notably for their local communities. And we give some examples of that in the paper. And this really got us thinking about really the importance of place, and against in particular developments of the last few decades in which, as multinational corporations but other organizations have also increasingly moved away from places and towards sort of global floating, if you would, above nation states. This has in turn, we feel, also contributed to further sort of disillusionment with the notion of corporate social responsibility, this sort of facelessness of organizations in which local communities, in which, for instance, their production part or their office or their shop front might be, there wasn't really a sense of who these organizations are. They were just a brand, a name, and there wasn't a sense of connection to the specific place and its specific concerns in which events were happening. And it occurred to us in the background of that there is a broader conversation about businesses' social license to operate, but particularly against sort of increasing inequalities but also at the same time rise of wicked problems and further global crises like the global climate emergency. And so the question of what can businesses do to really meaningfully ensure that social license to operate remained relevant. So against the backdrop of that, what we try and do in this paper is to suggest that in many ways the pandemic opened up an ideal opportunity to recognize the importance of place, to recognize the importance of community and of neighborliness and neighborly behavior, but also to use that to make a connection back into the past and trace the historical origins of the concept, which were very much tied to the original conception of CSR by authors like Bowen and others writing in the US, writing in the UK, and their practical counterparts, so organizations like Ford and others who very much operated on a community basis in each location in which they found themselves. And neighborliness really was central to those early conceptions of corporate responsibility and what that meant. And so against that backdrop, what we do is we offer an overview of some of those contemporary critiques, challenging the effectiveness of CSR, while also recognizing that necessarily it's only going to ever be effective in different contexts and differently. So against that, we really center and redefine neighborliness in a distinct way. We emphasize a number of related principles, including attentiveness to local needs, building sustainable relations with local communities where we really understand but also respect our neighbors, and an insistence on long-term gaze. So what we're trying to do is not necessarily center neighborliness as a sort of one-off assistance, though this might be where a certain organization can start, but really to center it as a respect-driven and a community and collaboration kind of a based attentiveness to the needs of one's communities and the unique ways in which the business can or an organization can support those. So to do that, we develop a number of principles, 3 baseline principles, 4 sort of reorientations and practices to help organizations who are interested in potentially centering neighborliness in their actions to do this. And finally, a sort of reflective framework to help you consider how you might begin to think about, okay, in my community, what do I do? And in doing that, we also give a plethora of examples examples, including a very concrete example of an organization whose leaders we interviewed, which is Liverpool Football Club's Red Neighbours, which is the specific arm that it has within its broader CSR sort of activities, centered on its immediate local community around the Anfield football stadium, and really talking through some of the ways in which they've come to know the needs of their community, work in collaboration, build those long-term respectful relationships, and still really work to focusing on something that was manageable for them, but also to which they could offer a unique contribution. So really our hope is that the pandemic has validated the importance of place, and yet again reminded us of that, and that really also validated that if in moments of acute emergency and crisis we are able to do these meaningful actions, then in moments where such crises are slowly easing but yet others are still on the horizon, neighborliness can be centered in really meaningful ways to ensure that organizations' license to operate continues. So we really hope that you enjoy reading the paper, and we thank you in advance for doing so.